This is part 2 of how I built my 600 watt solar generator with 1200 watt battery, with a 1200 watt peak. It has a battery backup of 1400 watt lithium ion batteries. In part 1, I showed how and where to cut the holes and place all the parts. In part 2, I will complete the build. Hope you enjoy. This is what it looks like. I'd like to start out this video by doing a quick overview of what I did in part 1 of the video. I cut in all the parts that are going to be on the outside of the case, including the outlets, the vents, the solar charger, and the lights. And then on the inside, I put a brace around the top edge so that I could place a shelf in here above the batteries. The next thing I did was place all the components on my shelf and then cut out the holes for everything. You have your solar charge controller, you have your inverter, you have your 2 fuses, a fuse block, and a vent for ventilation. And then the holes here are for to run your wires through. They come up from underneath where the battery is. The first thing you want to do is place the battery inside the box. With these pieces of wood in here, it just fits and doesn't move. Then you want to take a piece of styrofoam and put sticky tape on the back. And place this over the battery. That will protect the battery from any of your screws and stuff in the top of it. You just want to put it, and it comes up level with the board that I placed in here. That way when you go to put this on, it will fit perfect. The next thing we're going to do is start placing all the items on the shelf that's in here. I'll start with the inverter first. And what I'm doing is using, these are 1/2 inch screws on some areas, but you want to make sure that you place it on the bottom so that nothing protrudes through the top or through the bottom into the battery. I'm going to fast forward this process for the entire build of this portion here so it speeds up the video. Next, we'll place the solar charge controller on the board. Now we'll place the 2 fuses on the board. I'm only using 1 screw in this fuse. The other hole I will use a wood screw to screw the whole shelf down to the wooden frame around the edge. We will now install the 12-volt fuse block. All that's left to do now is take and silicone our vent in. You want to just put a little bead of silicone all the way around it. And then take and clean it up. I've already made up my wire connectors and marked each one as to where they go. You know, this is for one power, and then this is for another down below. The next thing we want to do is place our shelf back on top of the box. Just get all the plugs out of the way and everything. And then we'll start running our wires. Once you get the wires up through the case, you just go ahead and start connecting them. The 12 gauge goes to the main breaker here. Now the 14 gauge goes to the positive on this end. The negative goes down here, and this negative goes to the inverter. After you get everything placed, all the wires placed, just make sure everything's snugged up tight. Don't over tighten it. Then you hook the last wire up to the main power switch. This is the switch that'll go through the inverter. Then you hook the negative and positive both to the inverter. And then snug them both down. What you want to do now is hook up your wires to your solar charge controller. At this point, you want to go ahead and hook up your power to the batteries. Just raise this up, connect each of these to a power source. It doesn't matter which one. One is for your controller, one's for the main power of the inverter. Then you just make sure that everything folds back down in there, out of the way. Plug your inverter in. Push the wire down in it. After I get those tinned up, I use a special connector that I'll put a post or link to in the post below. And you raise these up all the way and just insert your positive into one side, push it down, lock it in place. Then insert your other positive into the red, same spot. Lock it down. Then take your negative, I'm not getting a good camera view on this, but I'm just inserting the wires into the holes, making sure they're tight when I pull on it. And then lock them all in place. I use these type connectors because just in case you have to change the lights, it's a little bit easier. And next thing I do is I'll insert a heat shrink over this wire here. This is your negative, but it's basically just going from the positive here and then to the positive of your battery. And then the negative will go straight to the battery, to the fuse actually. But then I take a wire and just kind of twist them back and forth to get it in the middle of that. Then you just take the heat shrink, pull it down. That you just take and insert this into the positive, clip it down, tight, lock it in, and it's tight. Next thing we want to do is take a positive wire 24 inches long, put heat shrink over it, and add it to the other side of the switch where it will go to the fuse block. Then you just want to pull the heat shrink up over it and heat it up. Then you take negative wire and plug it into the negative side of the terminal block here and click it in and make sure it holds. Then you take the positive and negative, hook it to a battery, and make sure that the lights work. On the momentary switch, I've already soldered these two together, the black going to the switch, and this is a momentary switch for the voltage regulator. and I've wired it to the positive side of that. Now I'm going to wire the positive and negative to the fuse blocks. The next thing we're going to do is hook up the fan to control. It's the controller for the fan to keep the heat, to dissipate the heat. And I use ferrules for this. It makes it a lot easier to insert the wire into these things. And that just crimps it on, so it can't come off. This is a wiring diagram of how you hook up the temperature control. The first lead goes from the fan to the positive here, which is marked KO on the inside. And then the next lead is your jumper that goes from K1 to plus 12 volts. And then the plus 12 volts also has the positive going to the fuse block. And then the negative from the fan is hooked to the negative going to the fuse block, and both of them are hooked in to the very last one, which is ground. The next thing we want to do is set the temperature on the fan so that it comes on about 30 degrees Celsius, which is 86 degrees Fahrenheit. And you just push this first button and then set it on 30. This is the up, this is the negative. So one takes them up, one takes it down. It should come from the factory set on 50. You want to take it down to 30 degrees and then just hit set again. And then what you want to do is take a heat gun or something and heat up the thermostat. You can watch temperature go up there. And at 30 degrees, it comes on. And then what it'll do is when it gets to 28 degrees, it will shut back, or it's got a 2-degree hysteresis, which is a difference. So at 32 degrees, it comes on, and I think 28 it goes off. The next thing we want to do is place our fan, and we want it to be right here behind the fan on the inverter. So what we'll do is figure out where the ribs are and try and go in between the ribs. Stay as close to the fan as you can, and then take an 1/8 inch drill bit and mark the holes. Then you just take and drill the holes out. Make sure and keep it clean. Then what you want to do is take a razor knife and cut this plastic. The rubber seal that's in here, you want to cut it on either side so that it's not going to come out or anything. Then you want to take screws. These are number 4 screws. and line them up to the holes. Then take a pen and mark just inside of the fan blade. Then take a littler drill bit and mark inside of each one. You know, just like every ½ inch, drill a hole. Then clean it all up. My hands are going to be in the way for most of this, but what I'm going to do is clean all this up with a utility knife, and then I'll cut this out in just a minute. The next thing we're going to do is place the fan about where it goes on the inside. Just do it on the outside, and then continue to mark the case. Hold it steady though. Then clean everything up. The next thing you want to do is place a fan. You want this part here to be facing up here where the thermostat goes. And you just stick your nut from underneath. Then you just tighten them down. Then you just pull, you have sticky tape on the back. I put 2 layers because it needs to go past the screws. And then basically you just push it above the inverter switch. The next thing I'm going to do is add zip ties to everything to kind of clean it up a little bit. The next thing I'm going to do is use these cable holders to hold all the wiring in place behind here, up against the back of the lid, so nothing's in the way. Place the number 6 1/2-inch screw from the back side to the top side. Then you want to continue to do it on over. The next thing we need to do is add these terminals to all the wires so that you can connect them to the fuse panel. Some of the wires are a little bit thin, so you're going to have to crush it. The next thing we do is connect all the wires to the fuse block. Make sure and get it underneath the screw. When you get that done, add a couple of zip ties to everything just to keep everything tight. You want to have it as neat. You can never put too many zip ties. I've done a few things off camera here. I made it comes with a telephone wire. I shortened a wire to plug the inverter into the switch. I zip tied the thermostat to the switch, and I used two-face tape to secure that in place. The last thing I'll do is add fuses to the fuse block. Make sure all the power's off, as I didn't. Make sure these are seated nice and good. And then put the cover on. The very last thing I do before I finish the case is I have 5 holes drilled in the shelf, and they go down into the wood brackets that are on the side to secure everything in place so that it never gets loose. That concludes the end of this video for how to make this box. I hope you like and subscribe so it will push me to make more videos similar to this. I have several different sizes that I make, and I would be happy to share my builds with you. Thank you. The weather isn't nice enough today to do a test on everything to show how it works. As soon as the weather breaks, which could be another week or so, I will set it up with solar panels and everything and show you how it does work. Thank you.